Okay guys, so this module here is just going to be how to add bed rails to all of our models of flatbeds. So to start off, this is only going to work if you did our stake pocket holes as we told you to in the videos, meaning that you have them cut like I have here, and that the inserts are used with 3x2 by 1 or 090 wall tube. If you use too thick a wall of tube, that actually makes this hole smaller, and this design isn't going to fit perfectly if you did that. So just make sure you have the same design as we have for the stake pockets, but we're just going to build 2 sideboards and a tailgate. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut to a screen that has a list of the materials you're going to need, whether you have a long bed or a short bed. So we're going to cut to that. You can pause it, write down all the materials you're going to need, and then we will move on to how to actually get these built. So once you have your materials together, which as you know is just a bunch of 1 inch by 1 inch by 090 square tube, some 2 inch wide by 1/8 inch thick flat bar, and some 3/4 inch round stock, we can get going on this build. So to get started, the first measurement we're going to need is we're going to build the 2 side pieces first and then the tailgate. So we're going to start with this driver's side sideboard. So the first measurement we're going to need is from the back of our headache rack gusset to this outside back corner of our bed. So this is going to differ depending on if you have a long bed or a short bed, and there's some differences between those as well. But so my measurement is 96 1/4, and I'm actually going to minus 1/4 inch because we want a 1/4 inch gap between the back of our headache rack gusset and the front of our bed rail. So I'm going to make these 96 inches even. Again, yours might be different if you have a short bed, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to say 96 for the length of these, and you will just insert whatever length that your bed is taking this measurement. Might be the same, might be different. So in order to build the first sideboard, we're going to need to cut 5 pieces of material. So 2 of these, and these are going to be 96 inches long, the length of my measurement, and they're 45 at both ends, opposite of each other. So the 96 inches is from long side to long side. We're going to need 2 of those. We're also going to need a piece of 8x2 flat bar. Now this is 2 inches shorter, so in my case it's going to be 94 inches, because the way this is going to go together is like these are going to pinch each other. This is just going to pinch this piece of flat bar here, and then we're going to have a 1x1 end cap that goes like this. So this piece, if this is 96, you cut this at 94, because an inch at either end minus off of there would net you a 94 inch piece. And then lastly, you're going to need 2 end caps, and these are 3 15/16 of an inch. You're probably wondering why it isn't 4. So we have a little bit of gap between our tube that we can fill with weld. So you know, cut out your 5 pieces of material. You're going to need 2 of these 96 inch long pieces, 45s opposite, a 94 inch or whatever yours may be of 8x2 inch flat bar, and then 2 of these 3 15/16 long, 45 at both ends. Alright, so I got all my material cut out for my first side rail, so you guys should have what you need cut out the same way that I do. So I got these 2 lengthwise pieces, my piece of flat bar that's in the middle of them, and then my 2 end caps. So you're also going to need one other thing to make this easier. So this is just a spacer, and this is 7/16 of an inch wide. It's just made out of 1/2 by 1 rectangular tube, but it doesn't really matter what you make it out of. It just needs to be less than 2 inches wide, because what we're going to do with these is we're going to place these on the underside of our flat bar, and that will keep the flat bar equidistant in the center of our pieces of tube, so that our flat bar is centered in our tube. So I've already got several of these placed on the underside, but I just place it on the underside here so that my flat bar is centered vertically in my tube. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to make a couple tack welds. So I'm going to line my pieces of tube up with the end of my flat bar. So the inside corner of where you cut your tube at a 45 should be lined up with the edge of the flat bar. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to squeeze these together to make sure it's tight. do that, I'm going to put several tack welds down the length of it. I have my spacers on the underside so that my flat bars can go this in. Just make sure you're squeezing together wherever you're welding so it's tight and sandwiched in there. I'm going to make about 5 or 6 tack welds down the length of this, and then we're going to immediately turn it over and tack weld on the opposite edge so that our piece doesn't get hot on one side and warp. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and you guys just do the same. Okay, so I've got tacks on both sides, the length of this thing, and it should be, if you look at it like this, this flat bar should be centered between the two edges of the flat bar like this, so it should look the same regardless of whatever side I'm looking at. So after we have that, then I'm just going to tack on my end caps. I'm just going to use a clamp to make this into place. So, as you can see, we got our first bed rail tack welded together, and from here, what we're going to do is we're just going to, everywhere we have a tack weld, we're going to just make it a little bit longer. Now, something that's really important when you actually go to solid weld this, do not make your welds very long because you don't want to heat this up or it's going to warp the whole thing out of straight, and you also want to weld on opposite sides. So what I'm going to do, for an example, is I would weld on all of these nice and short, small welds, and then I would flip it over and weld on the opposite backside corner. That way our heat that we're applying is always opposite of each other, and it will keep this thing from warping. So go ahead and just do some continuation of your tack welds, and also in addition to that, solid weld all your joints where your corners are, and then grind those off smooth. And then after that, we'll have one side rail completed, and then obviously we're just going to do the exact same thing for the other side rail, and then up next we'll show you how to install the stakes that slide into our stake pockets. So just to show you guys the finished product here, this is what your bed rail should look like after you have it completed. As you can see here, I've got my ends solid welded and ground off smooth, and then I just have some nice little stitch welds down the length of it in all 4 corners back, and it should look the same whether you are looking at either side. So go ahead and repeat this for the other side, and then we'll go over how to build the stakes. Okay, next on the agenda, we're going to build the stakes, and these are going to attach to our bed rails and then slide into our stake pockets. So we're going to need 6 of these. I'm going to show you how to build 1, and then you're going to need 6 in total. So material for each of the stakes, this is some 1x1 tube. It's got a 45 degree at one end and 90 degree on the other, and it's 5 3/4 from this end to the long side. So you're going to need 6 of these, 5 3/4, 1x1 tube, and then this is 3/4 inch round stock. You're going to need 3-inch piece of this, so 6 total 3-inch pieces of this. And then what we're going to do to put these together is we're going to weld this piece of 3/4 inch stock on the flat end of our stake. So I'm going to weld it. I'm just going to do a couple of stitch welds on either side, and then we're going to turn this into one piece. And then you're just going to do that and repeat it for 6. We're going to have 6 total pieces at the end of this. So finished product, you have your 3/4 inch square stock attached to the flat end of your steak. Make sure that it's attached to the long side. You wouldn't want to load on this side, so make sure at the end of it you're going to have 6 of these. So repeat this for the other 5, and then we'll move on to installing these onto our bed rails. Okay, so we got our steaks built. You should have 6 of these built. So now what we're going to do is actually install the steaks to our bed rails. So I've got my bed rail set on my bed like we're going to have it when it's installed. So what I've done is I just lined up this back corner with the back corner of my bed. You should have a 1/4 inch gap at the front between your headache rack gusset and the front of your bed rail. So now what we're going to do is install our steak pockets. So these, if you got one cut in the bottom side, you can just put them up from the bottom and then clamp it. So a couple things that are important here is you don't want to, you want to clamp this so that this edge of this steak is almost tight against the back of your steak pocket hole, but you want to be able to look down there and barely see daylight in this front crack. That's because when we powder coat it, it's actually going to make these a little bit thicker, and we don't want to be this to be so tight in our steak pockets that we can't pull it out. So get it clamped in here like so. You should have about a 32nd of an inch gap between this edge of your steak and the edge of your steak pocket hole. So I'm looking down here and I can see a crack right here on this front side. And then other than that, I like to get a square and just make sure square with the world. And again, this is lined up here. So once all that is set, put a couple tack welds on there. So after you get your first back steak pocket, your steak installed and tack welded to this, you might tack weld your entire bed rail to your bed. That way it doesn't slide front and back when we're putting on our other 2 steaks. So just make sure you got it exactly where you want it. You want this edge lined up with the back, and you got about a 32nd of daylight between the edge of your steak and the back edge of your steak pocket hole. So I'm just gonna throw a tack weld right here so my bed rail doesn't move front to back. And then we'll move on to put the other 2 steaks in. Alright, so once you got the back steak tack welded on and the bed rail tacked down to your bed so it doesn't move front to back, we're going to move up here and install the front steak pocket. Same rules apply as the back steak pocket, except on this one we're going to have a little bit of daylight on the front side of our steak. That way in total we have about a 16th, between a 32nd and a 16th of slack in this front to back, so when we powder coat it, that'll give it a little room to still slide in nicely but not be too tight. So same rules apply, just daylight on the front side of the steak. Make sure that the steak is 90 degrees with the bed, and then go ahead and tack weld it on. After you got that done, last but not least, we're going to do our center one. And this one you can center it in the steak pocket hole because our limits are going to be set by our end steaks. So this one just goes right in the center. Make sure it's at a 90. So after you have them all tack welded on, this is still tack welded down, so we're not going to be able to pull it out, but you should be able to cut your tack loose, pull your bed rail in and out, and it should slide in nicely but not be loose. After you ensure that that's happened, you can go ahead and solid weld these joints on all of your steak pockets, and then just go ahead and repeat that whole process on the other side, and then we'll have both of our bed rails done, then we'll move on to the tailgate. Alright, so at this point you should have your 2 bed rails completed. Your steak should be solid welded to your bed rails, so it should look something like this. So next we're going to build the tailgate, and there's a couple ways you can do this. You can do it the easy way, which would be to just put one straight continuous piece across here, but obviously our tail has a little bit of chamfer shape to it, so it's going to cut off a little bit of the bed. So you can either do that. If you do that, it's pretty easy. You just would measure the inside of one bed rail to the inside of the other, and then make another bed rail that is that length. And then as far as connecting it, you would just weld 2 pieces of flat bar to create a channel for your 3rd tailgate or your third bed rail, which would be your tailgate, to sit in. The other way to do it, which is the way that I'm going to show you that looks a little bit better, is to make a tailgate that matches the shape of the back of the bed. So it's actually going to be like a three-sided shape that contours right on the edge of the bed. So if we're going to do it that way, what we do is we just take 3 measurements. So I'm going to measure from the inside of this bed rail to the corner of my first chamfer, and then a second measurement, I'm going to draw a line right here and measure from here to the corner of this chamfer, and then my third measurement will be from the inside of this bed rail to the chamfer. And what we're going to do is take those 3 measurements. So I would take this measurement here, draw a line, take the measurement from the line to this chamfer. You should already have a line drawn, which would make it easier. And then the third measurement from the inside to that line. And you're going to add those 3 together, and then we're actually going to make one continuous straight piece that is the length of the sum of those 3 measurements. And then after we have that one straight continuous piece built, we're going to shoot a video on how to cut it apart with your saw and weld it together. But for now, just the sum of those 3 measurements, make a third bed rail just like you made these, one straight continuous piece. So I got the tailgate built, and if you're going to fit it to the back where you have the chamfer in it, it should be a little bit longer overall from if I have that in against the inside of the bed rail. This is hanging over a little bit. Since straight assistance is a straight line, and we're going to make this not a straight line. If you did the straight tailgate, then it should be that it goes from the inside of your one bed rail to the inside of the other. So to show you how to do this next part, where we're going to actually fit it to the back of the chamfer, what I'm going to do is whatever the measurement was that we took originally, where we measured from here to the first corner of our chamfer. And if it's a single rear wheel, it's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 22.5. Dually, it's going to be wider than that. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to measure that distance in and cut this piece with the saw. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to measure in 22.5 inches, or whatever the measurement is, from the inside of the bed rail to the corner of the chamfer. And we're going to cut that as well. So this chamfer is at 9 degrees, which means that we're going to cut our piece, our tailgate, at 4.5 degrees. Because if you were to if you wanted to make a 90-degree bend, you would cut your 2 pieces at 45 degrees. We're making a 9-degree bend, so we're going to cut it at 4.5 degrees. So this should be, if it's 22.5, I'm just going to measure whatever that distance is and make a mark. So I'm going to mark mine at 22.5. And we're going to do the same on this side. Whatever distance it is from the inside of your bed rail to your corner, I'm going to measure that far on my bed rail and make a mark. And then we're going to take this entire bed rail to our saw and cut it at 4.5 degrees, so that the outside of our cut is at this mark we just made. And then we're going to bring it back, and I'll show you how to tack weld it all together. So make your 2 marks, put it in your saw, cut it at 4.5 degrees, and we'll meet back here. Okay, so fast forward a little bit. After you put it in the saw, this is what you're going for here. So we got 3 sections. They match the shape of the tail. I just got them held up here with magnets at the moment. But a couple things you want to note before you weld it together. You want to have about a 1/16 gap on either end. That way we have enough room to slide it in and out once we get it powder coated. And so once you have a 1/16 gap on either end, you like the way it matches on the back, then we're just going to tack weld our joints. I usually leave it up here just with my magnets, or however you have it fastened to the back of your tail. Tack weld it in 3 positions on each joint, and then you can go ahead and solid weld it, and then grind off all your welds so you have a nice smooth junction where you weld these all together. Other than that, you will be done with the bed rails. The only thing that you need to add would be a channel right here for this to slide into. So you're going to weld a piece of flat bar on the back corner right here. It's going to be welded at the same angle as this tail, and then also on the back side you're going to put another piece of flat bar that's going to create a channel for this to slide down into. And then you're just going to drill a hole through your 2 channel pieces and your bed rail and put a linch pin in there, and that's going to hold everything together. But other than that, just weld up your pieces and grind them off, put your channels in, linch pins, and you'll be ready to go.